The Devouring Mother, When Love Becomes a Cage. When love becomes a cage. They told you she was the safest place in the world, that her arms were home, that her love was the thread stitching your soul together, but no one told you that thread could also become a leash. What if the person who first held you with tenderness now holds you back, not with anger, not with violence, but with warmth, with guilt, with that look in her eyes that says, "After all I've done for you." This is not a story of abuse. It's far more invisible. This is the tale of the devouring mother, the archetype Jung warned about. She's not evil. She doesn't yell. She nurtures, protects, smothers, and she never lets you go. You grow up in her garden, a place of soft earth and filtered sunlight, fed daily with her devotion. But the soil is too rich, the shade too constant, and before you realize it, your roots have curled in on themselves. You don't know how to walk, because she never let you fall. In this video, we're not demonizing mothers. We're liberating the children who never got to become adults, the ones still hearing her voice when they make decisions, still shrinking to fit her version of love, still mistaking guilt for loyalty. Through the lens of Carl Jung's archetypes and the haunting reality of generational shadow, we'll uncover what happens when love becomes a prison, wrapped in roses. You'll discover the hidden dynamics behind emotional enmeshment, the lie that guilt equals love, and the true path to individuation, not as rebellion, but as reverence. Because the most painful truth is this: she may have loved you with all her heart, but that doesn't mean she didn't clip your wings. This is for the sons still trying to earn approval, for the daughters still apologizing for wanting space, for anyone raised in a garden so safe they forgot how to survive in the wild. You're not ungrateful, you're not broken, you're waking up. And the moment you see the garden for what it is, you're already halfway to freedom. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Garden of Velvet Chains. Some prisons smell like flowers. You don't notice the bars at first, only the warmth, the softness, the way everything is always taken care of. It's not a dungeon, it's a garden, carefully tended, lovingly overgrown. And you are its most precious bloom. But while you were being watered, fed, and praised, something inside you forgot how to reach toward the sun on your own. This is the world of the devouring mother. Not a villain in a fairy tale, but a psychological pattern, a shadow role Carl Jung exposed as part of the universal mother archetype. She begins as a protector, then slowly becomes a warden, and not because she hates you, but because she's afraid of losing you. Imagine a greenhouse. Everything inside is perfect, temperature controlled, no wind, no predators, but no challenge either. No exposure, and without that, the roots never learn to grow deep. That's what happens when a mother confuses nurturing with ownership. Her fear of the outside world turns into overcare. Her identity gets wrapped in your dependency, and suddenly, your freedom feels like her rejection. Let me tell you a story. Hannah is 34, brilliant, compassionate, and well-spoken. She's got a stable job, a cozy apartment, and a soft laugh that fills a room. But every decision in her life, every trip, every relationship, every career move is filtered through one question: what will mom think? On her birthday, her mother baked her favorite cake and insisted she spend the evening at home, just the two of them, no friends, no partner, just us. Hannah smiled, blew out the candles, and pushed down the lump in her throat. She felt love. She felt guilt. She felt stuck. Later that night, she cried in the shower, unsure why. All she knew was that she couldn't breathe and didn't know how to leave. This is the velvet chain, a mother's love that becomes currency, that binds you not with rage, but with need. Need to please, need to protect her feelings, need to never grow too far beyond what she can reach. Jung understood this. The mother archetype isn't just about cookies and lullabies. It holds both the nurturer and the devourer. When unconscious, the devouring aspect takes over, not maliciously, but archetypically. It's not your mother's fault alone. It's the collective feminine wound passed through generations. That love means sacrifice, that closeness means fusion, that boundaries mean betrayal. So, how do you know if you're in the velvet garden? You feel guilt for creating space. You fear disappointing her more than yourself. You postpone dreams so she won't feel alone. You hide your success so she won't feel small. And worst of all, you question whether any of that is wrong. But what if love isn't about staying small to protect her fragility? What if real love says, go, grow, and I will meet you as an equal. The devouring mother fears your growth because it mirrors her own unlived life, but you weren't born to carry her regrets. Have you ever smiled through resentment, nodded through silence, hugged through suffocation? What if that wasn't love, but fear disguised as loyalty? Chapter 2. Mother Gothel and the Mirror of Love. There's a moment in every fairy tale when the hero looks in the mirror and realizes they were never the villain. But in the tale of the devouring mother, that mirror doesn't show a monster. It shows love. It shows sacrifice. It shows a woman who gave everything and took everything in return. In Disney's Tangled, Mother Gothel sings lullabies, brushes Rapunzel's hair, and keeps her safe in a tower. Her words are sweet, her smile warm, and yet she's a captor. Her love comes with strings, wrapped in soft words like, "Mother knows best." She cloaks fear in affection, control in care. But what's most haunting isn't Gothel's manipulation. It's how long Rapunzel believes it's love. That's the mirror of enmeshment. When your identity is so deeply tied to another's expectations, you can't tell where you end and they begin. And like Rapunzel, you look in the mirror and say, maybe I'm selfish for wanting more. Jung saw this as a crisis of individuation. When the archetypal mother, especially in her shadow form, demands loyalty over identity, she becomes the psychic wall between you and yourself. It's not that she doesn't love you, it's that her love becomes your reflection. If you disappoint her, you feel worthless. If you succeed too far from her gaze, you feel disloyal. Her approval is your mirror, and without it, you feel invisible. Let's go deeper with a real story. Marcus, 29, had a dream to move abroad and become a documentary filmmaker. But his mother, a widow who devoted her life to raising him, wept at the thought. "You'll forget me," she whispered. "I won't survive without you." So Marcus stayed, for 6 more years, until one day he realized he wasn't living with her. He was living instead of himself. When you look in the mirror, whose face do you see? Your own? Or the version of you she wanted? The one who stays close, says the right things, doesn't dream too loud? Here's the truth most children of Gothel never hear. You don't owe your mother your life. You owe her your gratitude, your love, your compassion. But your becoming, that belongs to you. Jung reminds us that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires confrontation, not rebellion, not hate, but honesty. Looking into the mirror and saying, "I love you, but I will not be you." And sometimes the most loving act is walking out of the tower, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because staying small for her comfort isn't love, it's erasure. Have you ever dimmed your light so someone else wouldn't feel left behind? What if the greatest gift you could give her is your full bloom? Chapter 3. The Inner Voice That Isn't Yours. There's a whisper in your mind. It tells you to be careful, to keep the peace, to not disappoint. It shows up when you're about to take a risk, speak your truth, or simply choose yourself. It sounds like reason. It feels like fear. But here's the unsettling truth. That voice may not be yours. It often begins in childhood, when you're too young to distinguish love from control, when every decision is met with subtle corrections. Are you sure that's a good idea? You know how I worry. What will people think? Slowly, what starts as protection becomes programming, and over time, your mother's voice isn't just in the room, it's in your head. Jung called this the complex, a cluster of unconscious patterns shaped by emotion, tied to archetypal figures, especially the mother. These complexes become internalized. So long after your mother stops speaking, her judgments live on as your inner critic, your self-doubt, your invisible leash. Let's bring this to life. Eliza was 41 when she finally noticed it. She'd just turned down a promotion, again, because it didn't feel right. But that night, journaling alone, she wrote the words, "What would Mom say?" And then she stopped. That wasn't her question. That was a ghost, a relic, a voice that once kept her safe, now keeping her small. This is the haunting part. You begin to mistake the inner voice for intuition. But real intuition empowers. This voice, it constrains, it doubts, it guilts. And that's how the devouring mother lives on. Not just in homes, but in heads. But this is where power returns. When you can pause and ask, whose voice is this? Does it serve me or stifle me? Is this love or is this legacy? The process of individuation demands this confrontation. Jung believed that true psychological freedom isn't about rejecting the mother, but separating from her psychic grip. You don't escape her by moving out. You escape her by discerning what is hers and what is you. Have you ever second-guessed yourself, not because you were unsure, but because you feared her disapproval echoing through your body? What if the courage to trust your voice begins with questioning the one that's been whispering for years? Because until you do, you're not living your life. You're reenacting hers. Chapter 4. Guilt is the currency of control. It doesn't slap, it doesn't scream, it doesn't threaten, it sighs, it withers. It says, I guess I'll be fine. And suddenly, you're the villain in a play you never auditioned for. This is how the devouring mother feeds, not on power, but on guilt. Guilt is the most socially acceptable cage. It's quiet, it's invisible, but it locks tighter than fear. Because fear is external, you can resist it. Guilt is internalized. It turns your love into a transaction. You owe me your closeness because I gave you everything. And you did love her. That's what makes it so cruel. She didn't need to say the words. Her silence said enough. The pause before she answered your call. The subtle drop in her voice when you canceled plans. The way she told others, she's been so busy lately, but I understand. I just miss her. That's guilt as performance. And it works because it targets your deepest desire, not to hurt the one who raised you. But here's the paradox. Guilt doesn't prove love. It proves control still works. Jung saw guilt as the emotional shadow of the mother complex. When a mother unconsciously intertwines her identity with her child's, any step the child takes toward independence feels like betrayal. So, the child, wanting love, learns to feel bad for growing. Story time. Daniel was offered a life-changing role in another city. His first thought wasn't joy. It was, how will mom take it? He delayed responding for days. When he finally told her, she cried, not out of sadness, but from fear. What will I do without you? She asked. And just like that, the moment of victory became a burden. Daniel almost declined, until his therapist asked, if someone else made you feel this guilty for doing what's right for you, would you call that love? And that's the twist. The garden survives not because the mother pulls the vines tighter, but because you water them with guilt. But guilt is not love. Guilt is not loyalty. Guilt is not sacred. Love says, I want you to grow, even if it means you outgrow me. Guilt says, stay small or I'll feel abandoned. So ask yourself, have you ever done something kind, not because it was true, but because you feared the emotional cost of not doing it? What if real freedom means disappointing someone and realizing they'll survive? Because guilt only works when you agree to carry it, and once you set it down, you realize it was never yours. Chapter 5. Why we worship the wound. You wouldn't think it, but sometimes the pain is sacred. We polish it, protect it. We say it made us who we are, and in a way, it did. But Jung would warn, there's a difference between honoring your pain and worshiping your wound. Many who grew up in the garden of the devouring mother confuse suffering with identity. If she loved you through sacrifice, you learn to equate love with loss. If she silenced her dreams for you, you grow ashamed of having your own. Her story becomes your mythology, her limitations become your lineage. And you carry that pain like a badge. She gave up everything for me. I owe her my life. She suffered so I could succeed. At first, it feels noble, but slowly, it becomes a cage. Because if your growth invalidates her story, you feel like a traitor. If you dare to be happy without her approval, you feel like a fraud. Let's meet Isabel, a writer who never publishes. Her words stay in journals, beautiful and unseen. Why? Because her mother once said, I used to dream of being a writer too, but I gave it up to raise you. And just like that, every page Isabel writes feels like betrayal. She's afraid to become the woman her mother never got to be. This is the haunting power of inherited wounds. You begin to believe healing means abandoning those who hurt. You forget that you're allowed to outgrow the pain that raised you. Jung teaches that healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means transcending it. It means recognizing the mother's suffering without becoming it. Your compassion doesn't require self-sabotage. But many resist this liberation. Why? Because the wound gives them something, meaning, identity, moral high ground. I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who never left her alone. These become ego stories disguised as virtue. And here's the hardest truth. Sometimes the wound becomes easier to hold than the unknown self. So ask yourself, Are you clinging to pain because it feels like proof that you're good, that you're worthy, that you're still loyal? What if the real loyalty is to your becoming, not your bondage? Because until you release the story that pain equals love, you'll keep returning to the garden, watering the same roots that once entangled you. Chapter 6. When Nurture Becomes Narcissism. It begins with a smile, a warm meal, a gentle reminder to call more often. It feels like love. It feels like care. Until one day you realize everything you do, everything you are, somehow always leads back to her. This is the hidden face of the devouring mother. When nurture becomes narcissism, not the overt, arrogant kind we see in movies, but the covert, fragile kind. The kind that wraps itself in selflessness and then demands repayment in obedience. In Jungian terms, this isn't just a personality flaw, it's the shadow of the mother archetype unchecked. When the mother's identity fuses completely with the child becomes her mirror, and mirrors don't get to have their own light. Here's what that looks like. Every compliment she gives is secretly about her. You're so polite, just like I raised you. Every concern is a veiled demand. I worry you're working too hard. Maybe take a job closer to home. And every boundary is met with hurt. I guess I'm just not important anymore. Meet Jonah. At 26, he tried setting boundaries for the first time. He told his mom he wouldn't be coming home every weekend. Her response? A 3-day silence followed by a text that said, I hope you find someone who loves you like I do. It wasn't rage. It wasn't hate. It was emotional hostage-taking, laced with passive martyrdom. This is narcissism disguised as nurture. It's not about wanting you to thrive. It's about wanting you to stay available for her reflection. Because if you grow too far, she loses the identity she built around being needed. And this is how you become trapped, not in her house, but in her version of who you are. But here's the real tragedy. She doesn't see it, because in her eyes, she's only ever loved. She gave. She sacrificed. And if you pull away, you're the selfish one. Jung would say this is the danger of unconscious projection. The mother projects her unlived dreams, her fears, her need for meaning, onto you. You become her second chance, her emotional surrogate. And when you try to claim your life, she feels robbed. But what she calls abandonment may simply be you breathing for the first time. Have you ever been accused of being ungrateful the moment you tried to grow? Have you ever felt torn between your own becoming and her belonging? Then hear this. Her wounds are not your weight to carry. Her story is not your script to follow. Because real love celebrates your light, even if it shines in a direction she doesn't understand. Chapter 7. The Psychic Umbilical Cord. The doctor may have cut the cord at birth, but in many families, it was never severed where it mattered most, in the psyche. And so, decades later, grown adults walk the world with an invisible tether, a line that stretches across cities, across time zones, across lifetimes, not in flesh, but in guilt, in duty, in identity. This is the psychic umbilical cord. It feeds you with more than blood. It feeds you with her expectations, her fears, her unlived dreams. And like a fetus in the womb, you begin to confuse nourishment with dependency. You grow in her image, not realizing your shape was sculpted by someone else's hunger. Jung saw this in the individuation process. He knew that for the self to emerge, the ego must differentiate, not rebel, but separate. And yet, when the mother-child bond becomes enmeshed, separation feels like death. Not of the body, but of the illusion that her survival depends on your obedience. Let me take you inside a scene. Anna, 38, is on the phone with her mother. She's just accepted a scholarship to study abroad, a dream she's held for 10 years. Her voice trembles with excitement until she hears silence on the other end. Then, a quiet, quivering voice says, I always knew you'd leave me too. Anna feels her stomach turn. The dream curdles. The cord tugs. That night, she cries not from joy, but from betrayal. This is the weight of the uncut cord. Every time you choose yourself, it feels like you're cutting into her. Every decision becomes a scalpel. But what if she's not bleeding? What if it's just the pain of her own unprocessed fear? The psychic umbilical cord isn't inherently toxic. It's natural in early development. But when it persists beyond childhood, it mutates. It keeps you dependent and her needed. And that dynamic, while comfortable, is deeply limiting for both. What's needed isn't guilt, but grief. Grief for the illusion of perfect union. Grief for the roles you both played. And grief for the mother you hoped she'd be. The one who could celebrate your freedom without folding into sorrow. Have you ever wanted to say, I love you, but I need to go, and felt like the words would shatter her? Then you're not alone. But hear this. Severing the cord doesn't mean cutting love. It means redefining connection without captivity. The real bond, the one forged in truth, can only form when you walk away, and she meets you there by choice, not by obligation. Chapter 8. The Myth of the Good Daughter, Sanvalas. Washered Bapakt, son. They called you so obedient. She never gave me trouble. He always stayed close to home. And for a while, you wore those words like medals, but underneath something felt off. Because being good came with a cost, your authenticity. This is the myth of the good daughter, the good son, a role handed down like family china, polished, praised, and passed along, but never questioned. Because to question it would be to dishonor her, to reject her love. And so, you folded parts of yourself into silence. You clipped your own wings and called it devotion. Jung saw these roles as personas, masks we wear to belong. They're not fake, they're adaptive. But when you forget the mask is a mask, you lose the face beneath. The good child persona is especially sticky because it's coated in praise. It's the role that gets the approval, the affection, the belonging. And yet, it keeps you performing long after the show should have ended. Let's visit Ethan, a teacher, a caretaker, the kind of man who never forgets a birthday or lets his phone ring twice when his mom calls. He's dependable, kind, but exhausted. His life runs on other people's needs. When asked what he wants, he hesitates because he honestly doesn't know. At 40, his inner compass still points to what makes his mother smile, not what makes his soul sing. This is the tragedy of the good child. You trade your truth for peace. You internalize her disappointment as danger, her tears as sirens, her loneliness as your responsibility. And over time, you forget that love should feel like connection, not compliance. The myth says, if you're good, she'll be happy. But reality says, her happiness was never yours to manage. Breaking this myth isn't rebellion, it's reclamation. It means asking hard questions. Who am I when I'm not trying to make her proud? What do I want when I'm not scanning for her approval? Would I still choose this life if no one were watching? These questions aren't easy. They shake the roots of the garden, but they're necessary. Because until you break the myth, you'll keep shrinking to fit it. Have you ever smiled while your soul whispered no? Stayed quiet just to be seen as good? What if the real you isn't obedient, but honest, not loyal, but free? Because the world doesn't need more good daughters. It needs whole humans. Chapter 9. The Smothering That Feels Like Safety. It's warm, predictable, familiar. She's always there, ready with advice, a home-cooked meal, or a subtle correction. You tell yourself, I'm lucky. Some people have no mother at all. But beneath that gratitude, a strange weight builds. Not anger, not even fear, just heaviness. Like every choice must pass through her filter before it can be real. This is the smothering that feels like safety. It's not abusive, it's not dramatic. That's what makes it so confusing, because how can something so gentle make you feel so trapped? Jung would point to the unconscious contract. She offers protection, and in return, you offer limitation. You shrink so she can feel needed. You soften your edges so she doesn't feel left behind. And little by little, you trade freedom for closeness, without realizing the cost. Let's walk with Priya. She's 32, lives with her mom, and works a job she's long outgrown. Every time she brings up moving out, her mother tears up. But what will I do without you? So Priya stays. Because leaving would mean confronting the narrative, that her independence equals her mother's loneliness. This is how smothering works. It doesn't come as force. It comes as fear. The world is dangerous. No one will love you like I do. You don't know how hard it is out there. And so you stay, not because you're weak, but because you were taught to see freedom as risk and dependency as love. But here's the deep twist. Safety without sovereignty is just a cage lined with cushions. Jung saw true development as stepping into the unknown. That includes leaving the mother's psychological womb. The problem is, when you've been smothered, risk feels like betrayal, joy feels like guilt, and peace feels unsafe. Because you've only ever known love through tension, through closeness, through control. Have you ever found yourself hesitating to chase joy? Not because it's wrong, but because it doesn't fit her story for you? What if safety is not the absence of pain, but the presence of self? You're not selfish for wanting space. You're not cruel for craving air. You're human. And humans grow. We separate. We form new roots in foreign soil. Chapter 10. How the Shadow Feminine Devours Potential. She doesn't raise her voice. She raises your sense of obligation. She doesn't slam doors. She lets them creak open just enough so you hear her sigh from the hallway. The devouring mother isn't always obvious. That's the genius and danger of the shadow feminine. Carl Jung taught us that every archetype has a light and a shadow. The nurturing mother is the light, warmth, care, sacrifice. But her shadow is something far more complex. Seduction disguised as safety. Control disguised as care. Martyrdom disguised as morality. In the shadow form, the feminine becomes possessive, not because she is evil, but because she has never known wholeness within herself. And so, she attaches to you. Your growth threatens her identity. Your boundaries feel like abandonment, and her deepest wound, the wound of invisibility, is soothed only by your compliance. Let me take you into the life of Solange, a talented painter. Her mother once painted too, before she gave it up for the family. As Solange gains recognition, her mother begins making small comments. That's nice, but do you think anyone really wants to hang that in their home? Or, I used to be like that, before I became realistic. These aren't insults, they're shadows. Echoes of unrealized dreams, now repackaged as subtle sabotage. This is how the shadow feminine operates. She doesn't scream, stop. She whispers, be careful. She doesn't forbid, she guilts. She doesn't shatter your ambition. She makes you doubt it just enough that you do it yourself. Jung's insight is profound here. The shadow feminine emerges when the inner masculine is undeveloped. Without her own direction, discipline, or sense of identity beyond motherhood, she turns inward and consumes. She doesn't want to hurt you, but she fears being forgotten, and so she keeps you small, not out of malice, but out of unconscious need. Have you ever felt like your wins were quietly resented? That your light made someone else feel dim? What if that resistance wasn't personal, but archetypal? The shadow feminine lives in all of us, but when it lives in the mother and goes unacknowledged, it devours potential, not with fire, but with fog. You forget who you were becoming before she needed you to stay the same. But this recognition is your liberation, because once you see the shadow, you can step out of it, and in doing so, you give her a choice, to meet you in the light, or remain behind. Chapter 11, The Lie of She Did Her Best. It's the phrase that ends every uncomfortable conversation, that silences every ache, that wraps trauma in a bow of politeness. She did her best. It sounds noble, gracious, mature. But here's the truth Jung would ask us to face. What if her best still broke you? We're not here to blame. We're here to see. Because healing isn't about casting her as villain. It's about taking off the blindfold, the one woven from family loyalty, cultural silence, and guilt-soaked gratitude. When we say she did her best, we often mean, I'm not allowed to feel hurt, or if I acknowledge what happened, I might become the bad one. But denying pain doesn't make it disappear, it just buries it deeper. And buried pain becomes the root of generational repetition. Let's enter the life of Michelle. She grew up with a mother who was always overwhelmed. The house was chaotic. Emotions ran high, and love came in inconsistent waves. As an adult, Michelle now minimizes it all with one line. She did her best. She had a rough childhood, too. And it's true. Her mother carried her own wounds. But here's the thing. Compassion doesn't cancel consequence. Jung taught that the mother complex becomes dangerous when it's idealized, because idealization prevents integration. You can't heal what you refuse to name, and best becomes a shield to avoid truth. Here's what's often missed. You can honor someone's struggle and still grieve what you didn't get. You can say, I love you and you hurt me, in the same breath. That is wholeness. That is individuation. That is the evolution of the lineage. The lie of she did her best locks you in a passive role, but your psyche wants more. It wants truth. And truth says, yes, she tried. Yes, she suffered. And still, what happened shaped me in ways I'm unlearning every day. Have you ever felt guilty for feeling pain because others had it worse? What if your pain doesn't need comparison to be valid? What if your truth is enough? Because when you stop defending the past, you start defending your future. Chapter 12. Breaking the spell without breaking her heart. You're afraid, not of her anger, but of her sadness, of the silence that might come, of the shift in her eyes when you finally say, no, because you've been told that setting boundaries is rejection. That distance means betrayal, and deep down, you fear, if I stop playing the role, will she still love me? This is the invisible spell, the one that keeps adult children locked in emotional servitude, long after they've grown. But here's what Jung teaches us. Individuation isn't destruction. It's differentiation. It's not about pushing her away. It's about pulling yourself out from under her shadow so you can meet her as a full human, not as a projection of her needs. Let's meet Clara. She's 36 and exhausted. For years, she picked up her mother's emotional weight, taking every call, absorbing every crisis, canceling her own life to soothe her mother's fear of being alone. When Clara began therapy and quietly pulled back, the guilt was deafening. Her mother cried, sent long messages, said things like, "You used to be so close to me. What changed?" Clara wanted to scream, "I changed!" But instead, she paused, breathed, and responded, "I love you, and I need space to become who I'm meant to be." Her mother didn't understand, not right away, but over time, something softened, because Clara didn't attack, she reclaimed. This is the path, not fire, but firmness, not cruelty, but clarity. You don't have to break her to break the spell. You just have to stop performing, and trust that the relationship built on performance was never as real as the one you can now create, with truth. The secret is emotional neutrality. Speak without defending, without blaming, without trying to make her understand. Because healing isn't a courtroom, it's an emancipation. And yes, she may cry, she may sulk, she may call less. But that's her journey, not yours. You're not responsible for her adaptation to your authenticity. Jung said that the self cannot emerge in captivity. That means freedom comes not by severing love, but by changing its shape. So ask yourself, what if the most loving thing you could do is show her the real you, even if she doesn't clap for it? And if she never understands, then know this. You still have the right to grow. Chapter 13, Mothers Who Never Grew Up. She looked like an adult, paid the bills, drove the car, held the title of mom. But behind the mask of maturity was a frightened child, still seeking approval, still fearing abandonment, still needing to be chosen. And if you grew up with a mother who never truly grew up, you were never just her child. You were her emotional parent. This is the tragedy Jung warned about. When the archetype of the mother fuses with the archetype of the child, not in you, but in her. She stays emotionally undeveloped, often due to her own trauma, and unconsciously pulls her children into the role of caretaker, confidant, even therapist. These mothers don't say, "I'll protect you." They say, "Don't leave me." They don't say, "You can lean on me." They say, "You're all I've got." And so, from a young age, you learn to suppress your needs, your fears, your dreams, because her stability depends on your compliance. Let me introduce you to Naomi. Her mother would call her after fights with Naomi's father, sobbing, venting, confessing secrets that no 12-year-old should carry. Naomi learned that to be loved, she had to be strong, for her, had to listen, had to soothe, had to betray her own childhood in service of her mother's arrested development. This dynamic has a name, parentification. And it doesn't fade just because you grow older. It continues into adulthood, where you still feel like it's your job to protect her emotions, explain your decisions gently, and never hurt her with honesty. Jung viewed this as a developmental bypass, a soul arrested in its growth. When the mother doesn't individuate, she uses the child to fill her psychic void. And the child, unaware, becomes her mirror, her therapist, her anchor. But you were not born to be her parent. You were not meant to suppress your needs for her stability. You were not designed to carry her emotional weight. And here's the hardest part to accept. She may never become who you need her to be. She may never apologize, never understand, never grow. And that, too, must be grieved. But her stagnation doesn't have to be your inheritance. Have you ever explained yourself so carefully, hoping she wouldn't take it the wrong way? Have you ever avoided joy just so she wouldn't feel left behind? What if the most mature thing you can do is stop trying to raise her? You are not cruel for choosing peace. You are not cold for creating space. You are not selfish for living a life she never modeled. Chapter 14, Why She Sees Your Freedom as Rejection. You take a step toward your dream. She takes it personally. You say, "I need space," and she hears, "You don't love me." You begin to change, and suddenly she's hurt, cold, distant. To her, your growth feels like abandonment. But why? Because when a mother fuses her identity with yours, your individuation feels like death to the version of her that exists through you. Carl Jung understood this as the danger of unconscious projection. When a parent doesn't develop a full identity of her own, she lives vicariously, projecting her purpose, hopes, and fears onto her children. So, when you begin to separate, she doesn't just feel sad, she feels erased. Imagine a mirror cracking. That's what your growth looks like to her. Not a celebration, but a shattering. Let's meet Elijah, a kind-hearted son who wanted to start a business abroad. When he told his mother, she didn't scream. She smiled and simply said, "I always thought you'd be the one to stay with me." And in that one sentence, she cast her pain onto his wings. The freedom he fought for now felt like betrayal, and the guilt, paralyzing. This is the emotional blackmail of enmeshment. Not loud, but heavy. Not violent, but manipulative. It's a web of emotional contracts written in silence and sealed in tears. But let's be clear. Your freedom is not a rejection. It's a return to yourself. Jung's work reminds us that every true birth requires separation, and that separation often activates the shadow in those unwilling to let go. It's not your fault if your wings unsettle her roots. It's not your responsibility to shrink so she doesn't feel alone. She may see your distance as defiance, but it's not. It's declaration. I am not your second chance. I am not your mirror. I am me. And yes, that may hurt her. But hurt isn't the same as harm. She's allowed her feelings, but you are allowed your freedom. So ask yourself, have you ever held yourself back, not out of fear of failure, but fear of her sadness? What if her disappointment is just a ripple, and your healing is the ocean? Your job is not to protect her from your evolution. Your job is to evolve. Chapter 15, Learning to Say No Without Guilt. It's just 2 letters, 1 syllable. But for many raised in the shadow of the devouring mother, no feels like betrayal. Not just a boundary, but a rejection, a wound, a declaration that shakes the entire structure of loyalty and love. And yet, no is the key that unlocks your life. You were trained otherwise. From a young age, you learned to anticipate her needs, soften your opinions, bend your will. Because saying no didn't just disappoint her, it shifted the emotional climate. Her smile dimmed, her silence grew, and the air between you chilled into something that made you question whether love was still safe. This is not accidental. Jung would say this dynamic arises when the boundary between parent and child is never fully formed. Without separation, your identity merges with hers, and so any assertion of your own will feel violent, even when it's whispered. Let's walk with Tara. Her mother texts her every morning, calls every evening, and expects detailed updates on Tara's day. When Tara tried to skip one call, her mom replied, "I guess I'm not important anymore." Just like that, Tara's no became a moral failure, a signal of coldness, ingratitude, rebellion. But here's the truth. No is not rejection. It's revelation. It reveals where you end and she begins. It draws a sacred line between love and ownership. And yes, it might make her uncomfortable, but you are not responsible for her emotional reactions to your boundaries. No is the beginning of self-respect, of reclaiming time, of breathing without permission. It is not a door slammed in her face. It's a door open to your soul. Jung taught that real growth requires friction. The moment you begin to set boundaries, the old psychic structure begins to crack. That's a good sign. It means your false self, the one molded by guilt and approval, is dying. And your real self is beginning to speak. So how do you say no? Not with rage, not with apology, but with clarity. I won't be attending this weekend. I need time for myself. I'm not available to talk right now, but I'll reach out tomorrow. I appreciate your care, but I'll make this decision on my own. At first, her responses may sting. She may guilt, manipulate, withdraw, but that's her fear speaking, not your failure. Have you ever swallowed your truth to keep her calm? Have you ever said yes, then resented her in silence? What if the real betrayal is the one you commit against yourself? Saying no isn't cruel, it's necessary. It's how you water your own roots. Chapter 16, Becoming the Parent Your Inner Child Needed. There's a version of you, small, wide-eyed, and waiting for someone to say, You don't have to earn love. Waiting for protection without control. Freedom without guilt. Permission to exist, not as a reflection, but as a full, messy, radiant self. And maybe that someone is finally you, finally. Because when the mother you needed couldn't show up, because of her wounds, her fears, her arrested growth, you didn't stop needing. You just internalized her absence, built a life around lack, learned to anticipate disapproval, avoid joy, shrink desires. Your inner child wasn't just neglected. She was drafted into a war of emotional survival. Jung called this the child archetype, not just a memory of the past, but an ongoing presence in your psyche, a part of you still frozen at the age when love first became conditional, a part still looking over its shoulder, wondering if it's safe to be seen. But here's the miracle. You don't need her to change. You need you to awaken. Meet Julian. As a boy, his creativity was mocked. His mother said, "Don't be weird. People won't take you seriously." So he became the serious one, the achiever. But the cost was silence. In therapy, he reconnected with the boy who used to draw in notebooks and dream about making films. And slowly, that voice returned, not through his mother's validation, but through his own permission. To become the parent your inner child needed is to reverse the roles. You become the one who says, "You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to want what you want. You are allowed to say no. You don't have to make her happy to be good." It's not about replacing your mother, it's about repairing the bridge between the child you were and the adult you're becoming. This isn't abstract, it's practical. It looks like choosing the foods you like, not the ones she praised, decorating your space without her taste in mind, speaking to yourself with the tone you once longed to hear. It's about claiming the mic in your own mind and saying, "I'm safe now. You can come out." Jung believed that wholeness comes not through perfection, but through integration. Your inner child isn't weak. She holds the map to your joy, your sensitivity, your creativity. But she cannot lead if she is still waiting for a mother who never arrives. Have you ever caught yourself doing something just to avoid her imagined reaction, even though she isn't even there? What if today, instead of asking, "What would mom think?" you asked, "What does my inner child need?" Because when you become the one who protects, nurtures, and validates that inner voice, you end the generational chain. And from that healed place, you step into true maturity, into the self. Chapter 17, The Feminine Path to Individuation. For too long, the path to power has looked like detachment, like cutting cords, burning bridges, severing ties. But the feminine path, the one Jung illuminated, isn't a path of destruction. It's a spiral, a return, a reclamation. One that leads not away from love, but into a deeper, freer version of it. Jung taught that individuation is the integration of opposites, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, mother and self. But in a world built on masculine ideals of separation and conquest, the feminine path has often been misunderstood. It's not passive. It's not weak. It's the path of embodied truth, of rootedness without captivity, of love that doesn't control and freedom that doesn't abandon. Here's the paradox. To truly break free from the devouring mother, you must become the healthy mother within, not just to your inner child, but to your evolving self. Meet Lucia. Raised by a mother who lived in cycles of chaos and dependence, Lucia vowed never to be like her. She became fiercely independent, self-sufficient to a fault. But something was missing. Softness, rest, intuition. She'd rejected the feminine entirely, associating it with weakness and pain. Through Jungian work, Lucia discovered that freedom doesn't come from rejection, but integration. She began to mother herself with presence, not control, with nourishment, not expectation. And in doing so, she redefined power, not as walls, but as deep internal trust. This is the feminine path, reclaiming the archetype from the shadow, turning the devouring mother into the divine mother, not as myth, but as lived experience. It looks like saying yes to your body's needs without shame, trusting your intuition even when it contradicts others, creating beauty for your soul, not for approval, nurturing others from overflow, not obligation. This path isn't loud, it's luminous. It doesn't demand, it receives. And when you walk it, you realize the mother wound doesn't have to define you, it can refine you. Have you ever been afraid to soften, fearing it would pull you back into dependency? What if softness isn't submission, but sovereignty? What if reclaiming the feminine is how you finally step into your whole self? Because to truly individuate, you cannot just cut away. You must call home every fragment that once hid in fear, even the feminine, especially the feminine. Chapter 18, The Invisible Father and Missing Logos. In the shadow of the devouring mother, there is often a ghost, not a monster, not a villain, but a presence that was absent, a voice that never came, a hand that never lifted you from the garden. This is the invisible father, the missing logos. Carl Jung emphasized that the psyche needs balance, an inner marriage between the feminine and masculine principles. The devouring mother archetype emerges, in part, when the father energy, logic, structure, protection, healthy distance, is absent or weak. Without the logos, there is no force to cut through emotional fusion, no sword to sever the overgrown vines of guilt and dependency. What does that look like in real life? Emma's mother ran the home. Her emotions ruled. Her preferences shaped everything. And her father? Kind, passive, silent. When Emma sought autonomy, her mother cried. When she turned to her father for support, he said, "You know how your mom is? Just try not to upset her." And in that moment, he vanished, not in body, but in spirit. This absence teaches a dangerous lesson. There is no escape, no advocate, no balance, just one orbiting sun and you, forever in its gravitational pull. But here's the deeper truth. The logos doesn't only come from outside. As you grow, it becomes an inner force, the ability to discern, to decide, to speak your truth without permission. When you integrate the missing father, you don't wait for rescue. You become the one who walks out of the garden. Jung saw this as critical. The masculine principle, when matured, doesn't dominate. It liberates. It draws boundaries. It carves space for the self to emerge. Without it, we drown in emotion, guilt, and enmeshment. With it, we find clarity in chaos, structure in the storm. Have you ever craved someone to just say, "It's okay to leave"? Someone who wouldn't collapse into emotion, but hold space for your becoming. What if that someone is already inside you? This inner logos is not hard, cold masculinity. It's loving discernment. It's the part of you that says, "This is mine, that is hers. I can love her without living her life. I do not exist to regulate another's pain." When you awaken this force, the devouring mother loses her grip, not because she changes, but because you do. Chapter 19, How to Love Without Losing Yourself. You still want to love her. Of course you do. She gave you life, memories, pieces of yourself you still carry with reverence. But now, you want to do it without disappearing, without swallowing your truth, without shape-shifting back into the child she once needed you to be. This is the final transformation, loving without losing. Jung believed true individuation doesn't mean isolation. It means standing whole in relationship. The goal isn't to banish your mother from your heart. It's to re-enter the relationship as a sovereign being, not as a mirror, not as a caretaker, but as you. Here's the paradox. The more you anchor into your selfhood, the more capacity you have to love deeply, without distortion. Real love does not require fusion. Real love makes space. Real love sees boundaries as bridges, not barriers. Let's revisit Clara, the woman who once feared that setting boundaries would shatter the bond. Months after creating space, something began to shift. Her mother grew quieter, but not with resentment, with reflection. And eventually she said, "I miss you, but I can see you're becoming who you're meant to be." It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. This is the outcome of holding your ground with love, not as a sword, but as a center. To love without losing yourself, you must. Know your yes is sacred, and your no is holy. Let her have her emotions, but not make them your responsibility. Speak truth with warmth, but without shrinking. Honor her journey while remaining loyal to your own. And most of all, you must accept that she may never meet you where you are, that her ability to receive your truth may be limited, but your choice to live it anyway, that's the alchemy. Have you ever withheld your joy because she wasn't ready to celebrate it? Have you ever dimmed your dreams to stay relatable? What if your full light is the only honest offering you can bring to love? This kind of love requires courage, presence, inner rooting, but it's the only love that nourishes without swallowing. Chapter 20, Burning the Garden, a rebirth into the wild. You stand at the edge. Behind you, the garden, lush, soft, familiar. It once fed you, sheltered you, gave you a name, but now it asks for too much, your fire, your voice, your becoming, and ahead, the wild, untamed, unknown, but honest, alive, yours. To leave the garden isn't about bitterness, it's about rebirth. Carl Jung described individuation not as a one-time event, but as a death and rebirth of identity. The child must die for the adult to live. The borrowed must burn for the true to rise. And sometimes the garden must go up in flames for the forest within to awaken. You don't do it with vengeance, you do it with reverence, because you're not destroying what was, you're ending what no longer serves. You're releasing the mother voice from its throne inside your head. You're unhooking your worth from her gaze. You're stepping into the space where your self, your sacred, sovereign self, finally has room to breathe. This is not a metaphor, it's a moment. Meet Zane, raised in a household of obligation and guilt. He never once raised his voice, but he never lived his truth either. On his 40th birthday, he went on a silent retreat. No phone, no mother's texts, no distractions, just him and his thoughts. On day 5, he walked into a field and whispered, "I forgive you, but I release you." And for the first time, he felt like he belonged to himself. That's what burning the garden looks like. Not dramatic, not loud, but decisive, clean, final. You mourn the good moments, you hold the love, but you let go of the leash. You stop trying to make her proud. You stop waiting for her to understand. You stop seeking her permission to be who you already are. And from the ashes, something ancient rises. Not a version of her, not a version of the past, but you, untamed, rooted, whole. Have you ever felt a quiet knowing deep inside? A sense that it's time, not to fight, not to flee, but to release? Then this is your call, to burn the garden, to walk barefoot into the wild of your own becoming, to live without apology, to love without captivity, to rise without guilt. Because you were never meant to stay small. You were never meant to stay safe. You were meant to bloom beyond the walls that once held you. And now, you finally can. Call to action. Remember who you were before guilt spoke your name. You've walked with us through 20 sacred thresholds, each one a crack in the garden wall, each one a light breaking through the vines. You've met the mother as mirror, as shadow, as myth, as memory. And more importantly, you've met yourself. You now know that love can entangle, that sweetness can suffocate, that loyalty can imprison. But you also know freedom doesn't mean hate, it means wholeness. You don't have to erase her. You don't have to win her approval. You only have to return to the one she forgot to protect. You. You've reclaimed your no. You've learned to love without losing. You've seen how her wound became your inheritance, and how that chain ends with you. Now breathe. This isn't the end. It's your invitation to begin, to mother yourself with clarity, to father yourself with strength, to walk into the wild with the voice she once silenced now singing you forward.